Well, hello, folks. I'm pretty tired. I have some project going and it keeps me up at night. So, got to get some exercise today and get some sleep this weekend. Anyway, I woke up this morning and I popped across an article about the EU recommending that Europeans stock emergency supplies, 72 hours worth, citing climate problems, war, and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, the poly crisis, right? And of course, now they're trying to rearm NATO. So, NATO countries want to start rearming because we should be afraid of the Russians and the Chinese. I just want to point out very clearly that, in my opinion, this fear mongering is just a way for these useless bureaucrats and politicians to stay in power. If they are so good at their jobs, why do we have any complaints? Is it because there's some communist regime in Asia, or because the Russians plan to eat your children in Wales or, Northern Ireland or something? They're coming to get you. And mind you, you can read history. You can go all the way back to thousands of years BCE and look at expansions of, our species from civilized times around the world and so on. And you'll note that people do come into a lot of conflict, but for various different reasons, right? Sometimes it really is climate change. What I mean by climate change is that the climate it is a changing because of natural forces. And what I mean by natural forces has nothing to do with Homo sapiens. It's just that things change on this planet. There's a long record of it for various reasons: volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, glacial cycles, emissions from the sun. There's just so many things going on that change climate. And it's a big, complex system, living system, in the sense that you have rainforests and forests and plankton and algae and whales and fish and mammals and mushrooms. It's just a big, huge ecosystem, biosphere. And the biosphere does have an impact on climate. And we're part of the biosphere, human beings. But recently, of course, we all know that since the mid 19th century, a global heating has been occurring. And that is anthropogenic, human caused. And we are the only hominids or humans still standing. So it's because of our activity. Of course, there's other things going on that impact the sixth extinction, the bug apocalypse, problems in the oceans, problems with other habitats and ecosystems, whether it's a rainforest or some other forest, or, impacts on marine life and fisheries and all these kinds of things. But anyhow, these occur because of our activities. And we've been rapacious and warlike from day one. Read the Bible. Read any of the myths. Go back to Troy or whatever, Homer. Everybody knows that, right? So in modern times, I'm thinking about, from the 19th century, 20th, and 21st century. But anyway, let me go back to my friend Eric Lee, who posted a simplistic little blurb about the Normanist origins of the Rus. Okay. I did some research after reading this, and it's, 8th to 11th century Christian era So Normanism, so it was the idea that the Rus had their origins among the Normans, i.e., among Northmen. The idea that Vikings founded Rus was seen as politically unacceptable by many anti-Normanist Russian historians. So they have a different idea about Slavic and so on. So I did a deep dive research on that using Gemini research tool because, yeah, I don't have time to do it otherwise. And I'm really happy I have this tool. And they provide you with a ton of references to what it comes up with, Gemini. And you can spend some time going through those references and doing further research to find out how accurate it is and so on. Anyway, no time for that. But anyhow, he has a thing that he focuses on, which is metastatic humans, early modern humans, EMH, their migrations, and whether it was, Indo-European ancestors were an admixture of hyper-violent expansionists going back 55K years out of Africa and so on. I don't know if early modern humans were hyper-violent or not. I have a feeling that sometimes Cro-Magnons would run into a group of Neanderthals and they wouldn't fight. And, genetically speaking, there's lots of reason to believe that, women were shared as gifts to maintain peace, to avoid fighting and so on, and to make a familial connection. Anyway, there's tons of information about this stuff if you're interested in looking into it. It's quite fascinating. I don't know if they were all hyper-violent, but yes, later on you look at the Mongolians and the Scythians and the Huns and the this and the that and the other thing, and we're pretty damn violent, right? I'm not as up on Chinese history and Japanese history going back that far, like to the 5th century or BCE, for example, but there are some records and so on, and that's a fascinating history. Africa as well, not so up on that. India, blah, blah, blah. But, we're human beings. We fight for stuff. We migrate around for various reasons. If a tribe wants to leave a place, they usually have good reasons to go. And it could be climate. It could be that they overhunted or overfished, or who knows. There could have been a drought, or maybe they did have competition with another group and they were on the losing side of that, or maybe they were just curious, adventurers. There are lots of reasons, I'm sure. But anyway, the Indo-European expansion is interesting, and it's around the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, and it branches out further east towards India and further west towards Europe, and then it goes into the Indo-Aryan area in Iran, and then up into the Celtic area, Ireland, and all that stuff. Anyway, it's fascinating to see that. Then on Wikipedia and other sources, more academic ones, you can see these various migratory lines drawn around these regions. The out of Africa thing is complex because some populations left Africa a long time ago, and then maybe they went back, and then other populations came out, and maybe they went back. So it's more like in and out rather than just out of Africa. But you can look, there's so much evidence that our species originated in Africa. There are some other theories that maybe some independent species arose in Eurasia and turned into Homo sapiens. But there's not much evidence for that. But some people argue about that. So I did my own research with the help of these wonderful research tools, AI research tools. So, he mentions these things in passing. He calls society metastatic modernity. That's what we're living in now. And I often mention techno-industrial, over-complex, modern society. And you can trace that back, basically, to the 19th century. But, we were running around the planet long, long ago, tens of thousands of years ago. Um, and that's just reality. So I want to read you here what he says here because it's relevant to what I'm going to go into at some point. I want to make the point that our leaders don't know much about anything except that they're in this game. Their careers are the most important. Their status, their income is more important than anything. And the plebs and proles, people like me, I don't know about you, don't matter to them at all. Do you have skin in the game? Is your son or daughter going to go fight in the next big war? And is that what you want for them? And is it inevitable? Can it be prevented? I don't think the U.S. has been very diplomatic ever. I don't know about colonial period before the revolution, but come on, diplomacy. Yeah, they used to make treaties with Native Americans, whatever, but they broke them all. Anyway, whatever. People do that. I don't think America has soft power other than movies and rock and roll and things like that, street art and hip hop and whatever. Uh, we're not really soft. We go out and take things and get things. We're a business culture. We are a corporate culture. We are a big business culture. We are a get rich culture. We are a I could own the railroads and be wildly wealthy and I can beat my enemies. And, it's like that TV series Billions, right? There's just one big competition, and money and capital is a way of keeping score. So he says pre-modern techno-industrial society spread from the steppes of Central Asia 7K years ago and as agro-pastoral expansionists with domesticated cattle, horses, and dogs. They had solid wheel carts, plows for cereal production, draft animals, metallurgy, and they worshipped a sky father above and patriarchal alpha males below. Yeah, so big gods. I've talked about that many times. So you have the patriarchal males, and some of the Y chromosome bottleneck theories are about, these higher status males just mating with more women from various tribes. And so other males, lineages disappeared. It's not just that you kill everybody. So it's more complex and nuanced than that, as things usually are. So they spread by turning grass into milk, meat, and energy slaves to pull carts, plows, and by turning matrilineal agrarians into Proto-Indo-Europeans whose expansion involved displacement or conquest to immortalize individual achievement of imperishable fame by depopulating indigenous males and breeding with females whose children learned their language and customs. Our monetary culture was added later on. So you think about Achilles, right? He wants to be famous. He wants, or some of these Roman emperors that want to be thought of as God. This is like, no one will ever forget me and my line and so on. So fame plays a big part of it, right? And I imagine that modern leaders are similar, although not necessarily as grand. Nobody's going to make a monument like the Parthenon to somebody, but they're going to make Trump Tower. Going to build a tower and put your damn name on it. And, there you go. You're on the way to the White House. So the other thing about, killing the high status men and taking their women, this is true. And a lot of these, royal families just maintain peace by sharing women, with different kingdoms and so on. Game of Thrones, or, you can look at real history about that kind of thing. Frankia. So right now, Indo-European languages cover all of North, Central, and South America, a lot of sub-Saharan Africa with a couple of little places in there that are a little bit, these are original primary language. All of Western Europe and Scandinavia and the, Russia, Siberia area and around the Black Sea, Caspian Sea, and then down through the Middle East and Turkey and Iran and Iraq and all the way down to Sri Lanka. Of course, you have bits and pieces, islands in Asia as well. Philippines in particular, where you have recognized Indo-European languages in parts of Malaysia, parts of, Malaysia basically, and Vietnam, where they spoke French during the colonial periods. Then you have Australia, New Zealand, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the Indo-European language sphere as we see it today. And before that, we could talk, or we could put another subcategory in there, which is the Anglosphere. WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant types. Eventually, Catholics became white, and other groups became white because they fit in so well. They assimilated so well. Italians weren't, Spanish weren't for a long time, but now they are. Jews weren't for a long time, but now they are because we have Israel and so on. So, all these sub-Saharan African countries, a huge number of them, most all of sub-Saharan Africa, had colonial rule or imperial rule. And so they spoke French or Spanish or Portuguese or German or Italian or, English, whatever. And the same thing, the British Raj. So many Indian people speak English now and so on. So you go around the world, you see that, okay? The indigenous people in Brazil speak Portuguese, right? And the indigenous people in Colombia speak Spanish and whatever. So there you have that. So what we techno-industrialized humans consider normal is anything but. So again, you could think of this as a timeline. You have to define what's normal. I mean, what's normal now is different than what was normal at some other period of history. But if you want to categorize as more normal something that lasted longer over a longer span of time across the world, maybe that's the real normal. But we have the new normal, as you know. We have normalized anthropological atavisms, belief-based cognitive pathologies. And I totally agree with that. Belief-based cognitive pathologies. I mean, I think that Austrian school economics or, neoliberalism is a pathology. It's killing the planet. It's an omnicidal heat engine, and it's destroying habitat, and we need habitat to live. It's destructive as hell, and it has been for a long time. And it gets worse. You look at America today, and it's just getting worse. By the hour, it's getting worse. We have the new Monroe Doctrine now. So the U.S. Wants to take over Canada and Greenland and Panama and, expand and plant your flag. Of course, if we do it, it's okay because we do it for the right reasons, right? Freedom and democracy and whatever. And if China or Russia or some other country wants to defend its borders for whatever reasons, they can't do that unless we want them to, right? Because we're the hegemon. We know what's right and wrong. You can go back to the Holy Roman Empire or the Roman Empire, any empire in history, and you'll see people are saying, like, you pay your taxes, we'll let you do what you want to do, but you're Roman now. Our gods are above your gods. Our way of doing thing is above your way of doing thing. If you don't want to fit in, you're screwed. We're going to kill you. So everything we think we truly know is asserted, not necessarily knowledge. And true knowledge comes from a lot of places, obviously, but you define wisdom as you will, or experience, whatever. But, we can learn about how nature works because we have these wonderful tools, mathematics, we have language, abstract models we can create. We also have the physical sciences, and we have lots of great tools to parse uh, physical reality, right? That's why I want to talk about Baruch Spinoza in a video and put those threads together. So our consensus narratives are based on error, ignorance, and illusion. I would say yes from a understand how nature works perspective. But of course, you're going to hang on to your thing because it's your thing. You identify with it. And as I spoke about in another video, we're talking, these basic biases, confirmation bias, groupthink, motivated reasoning, cognitive dissonance, and on and on. And of course, we have these beliefs in our religions, in our nation states, and that we're somehow special and better than other people. So, Citations Needed podcast today, they pointed out that for Israel, anybody who's anti Israel is Hamas. So you can kill lots of children. It's not a big deal. They're all Hamas. And you can blame it on AI targeting. It's a great episode. I recommend you listen to it. I posted it at Facebook, Globe Hackers page. So anyway, a recent Russian behavior has a history of attacking others when deemed necessary, as others do, e.g. the U.S. of Americans. So I totally agree with that. So what did I do? I went and did some research this morning. I was working late. I couldn't sleep. I spent another 2 hours on this thing. I looked at Russian origins. So it's, going back 75,000 years, Homo sapiens and Cro-Magnons and early modern humans and all these different things going on. And then Russia region from the east around 5,000 years ago. Anyway, I go through this whole thing. It's a long piece, lots of citations, tons of them. So key points: hypothesized origin, time frame, spread of languages, possible causes, impact on indigenous populations, step hypothesis, Anatolian hypothesis, cultural diffusion, genetic evidence. There's tons of that. So it's very interesting. And again, lots of citations. And then I went to a deeper dive in research, early human migrations, and the ethnogenesis of Belarus and Russia. You have to understand that Ukraine fits all into that one thing. The nation states that we have today are newer arbitrary formations based on more recent history, right? If you look at, anyway, I don't want to get into this too much because I'm 23 minutes already. Jesus, time flies when I'm talking. So the first peoples, early modern human migrations in the Russian region, and on and on and on. So I'm going to do a deeper dive video on this part, just trying to boil it down to 40 minutes or so that you can understand the origins of the Russian thing, Rus or whatever, to put things into context so you have a better understanding, because all of these politicians are going to scare us into a horrific war. I want to ask you, are you willing to invest your money, your material wealth, your children's lives, and your life potentially in a nuclear war for this shit? Just to keep these bureaucrats and politicians in their nice little suits having their fun little meetings and acting important when they're fucking everything up. And if they're not fucking everything up, I want to ask you, why are you complaining? And if you're not complaining and everything's rosy, I'm so happy for you. Great. Keep your blinders on, because it's coming for you too if we keep acting stupid and not listening to what physics and nature is telling us. We're all going down, regardless of what you believe or think or know. And believe me, you don't have to be epistemically humble to be special. You know, you're still ignorant, relatively speaking. You can be humble and ignorant. But anyway, these earlier ventures, 185,000 years ago and all this kind of stuff. So the next thing I want to look at is the Russian attacks and U.S. attacks, okay? So, and why? So my prompt was like, give me the conflicts that happened and a reason why. And mind you, I've read a lot of books on various things like the Taliban and the Afghan and U.S. war and Vietnam and World War II and whatever. This all kinds of histories. It's quite interesting. And it's nuanced, right? It doesn't come down to a sentence. But most people are happy to have the outrageous, frightening sentence to like make their day and get them all excited without even thinking about the nuances. And if you want to understand the recent Ukraine-Russia war, you can limit your context to just the invasion of Crimea, why that happened, and Provoke, this fantastic book that's extremely well researched, and you'll have a really good idea of stuff. But this gives you a nice little bit of context if you want to look at it. So this is military. So anyway, my prompt was, or I was talking about, I want to explore Russophobia and xenophobia. I want to know the reasons for these proxy wars and European interests in war with Russia, Russia's interest in, invading places like why did they go after Hungary and Poland and so on? What were the reasons behind it? Because people don't just wake up in the morning and say, let's go invade a country just for fun, because there are risks. It's a big investment. And, you can lose your cushy job as a leader or politician if you screw up. You can look at the enemies of Stalin, and you can look at Trotsky, and you can look at Lenin, you could look at all these people and see the risks they took. And some of them just got lucky to rise to the top. Lenin going as far as he did, and Stalin lasting as long as he did, and so on. It's not a guarantee, right? When you decide to go to the top, you're going to have some enemies. So, okay, so here's some military operations initiated by Russia and the Soviet Union, right? So we have the Russian Federation now, and before we had the Soviet Union. So expansion of Tsarist Russia in the 18th and 19th centuries, numerous campaigns to expand the Russian Empire, including wars against the Ottoman Empire, Persia, Sweden, and various Central Asian khanates. So I'll stop the video right here, and I'll switch to a screen recording and a voice recording so you can see my notes. We'll just run through this really quickly because I've done a lot more research on it. Why do I do this? Because I want to put it into context, and I want to suggest that we are not incentivizing through our activities in our communities the kind of diplomacy and the kind of soft power and the kind of dialogue and the kind of work required to maintain peace, and that war and chaos benefits a small, tiny percent of people in this world, including these politicians and service providers, law coders, representatives in government and so on, and bureaucrats, and other professional people, obviously multinational corporations and whatever, the whole profit machine, the wealth generating machine, benefits a tiny group of people. You get wrecked, you get ruined. And so I would want you to think, what kind of leaders do we want today in the 21st century when we have all of these challenges, and some of them are existential challenges and very dangerous? What kind of leaders do you want? Now, this might be boring to you, which is fine. I mean, never mind. But I'm very passionate about it because I I wake up every morning, I see this madness, and I think, what the hell's going on? And I just can't refrain from commenting on it. Not because I think I'm smart or smarter than you or anything, but just because I've done a little bit too much reading and traveling in my time, so I'm curious about these things, and I can't help it. Okay, I'm not. I don't want to convince you of anything. If you're really comfortable in your ideology or religion, you don't want to hear any. I have a lot of friends who don't want to hear any of this. They're just not interested at all, and they will be extremely angry with you if you bring up anything like this. So I'm not going to make any new friends among the expat community talking about this stuff. But they're telling us to stock 72 hours worth of emergency provisions because of all the shit that they caused and that we caused because we just sit back and take it and don't participate in our democracies the way we should, in my opinion. Civics and so on. Uh, anyway, I'll stop now because it's 31 minutes. And I'll do a separate video on this report, this research, and I think you'll find it really, really interesting. So have a nice Friday and take good care. Bouliam tea.